Okay, so this question is the Voronoi diagram, and you've got points A, B, C and D labelled on your graph, and they're 4 points that represent the stations where environmental readings are taken. And the environmental officer gets a call from a homeowner who's at N, which is 4.3.5. So 4.3.5 is this position here. So this is homeowner N, and they're concerned about the level of pollution. So the officer goes to that location and tries to check the readings from the stations to find out what the air quality is at his house. So we need to work out, or we need to explain, for the first part of the question, the officer decides to use as an expected value the average pollution recorded at 3 of the stations, explain why this is reasonable, and state which 3 stations he should use and what value he will use. So if we're going from N, the 3 closest places are D, C and B, because they're all equal distance to point N. That's how the Voronoi diagram is formed. So it makes sense that we would use D, C and B, or B, C, D. So it makes sense to use B, C and D. So they're the 3 locations that I'll be using, and I need to state the value that he'll use. So you need to have some sort of explanation here for the first part of why they're the stations, and it's because they're the closest, and that's the vertex formed with the Voronoi diagram. Then we can say which value he'll use. So he's taken an average of B, C and D. So an average would be adding them all together. So 2.1 add 2.6 add 2.8, and then we divide them by how many we've got, and that gives me a value of 2.5. So the value that he'd be using is 2.5. So we're estimating that the pollution at N is around 2.5. And then for the third part, they're suggesting that a waste dump is going to be designed. So they're going to burn the town's rubbish, and obviously that will have an impact on air quality. And they want to minimise that from the readings. So we want to try and find a place that's as far as possible away from the different readings, A, D, C and B. So when we look at them, we know that the furthest point away is always at one of the vertexes. We can't just use a position out here, for example, because we don't know what's happening beyond our graph. So there may be another point straight after it. So we always use one of the vertexes, which are the furthest points away. So let's label this vertex as M, so that it's got a name. So we need to work out which of those is the best one to use. So we know that N is the same distance from D, C and B. So we need to find the distance that N is from each point. So we can use any point to help us to use that. So for example, BN, the distance, and the distance between that using the distance formula and the coordinates that I've been given is 60 minus 40 squared, and then I add to that 20 minus 35 squared, and I square root my answer. So it's just using Pythagoras, and that gives me 25 kilometres. So N is about 25 kilometres from each of the points. So that's one that I could use. And now I can do the same and look at M and see how far away M is. So I could use any of those points that are closest to M. So either A, D, or B. They're all equal distance from M. So I'm going to take one of those points. Let's take A and M. And again, just using that formula, I can work out how far away everything is from M. So 30 minus 0 squared. So all I've done here is estimate the coordinate of M, and I've suggested that M is about the coordinate 3, 2.2. So that's what I'm using to do this. And then I'm going to add to that 22 minus 20. So again, making sure that we use the units as kilometres rather than just the coordinates on the grid, and that gives me about 30.06 kilometres. So it's clear that the M coordinate is further away from the stations than N, and therefore that's the one that I'm going to pick. So my answer would be to choose M, as this is further away from the other coordinates. So for this one, there was 3 marks in total. One of them was for some sort of reasoning, showing that you're looking at N or M because they're the furthest away from the points. The second one is for the working out, finding the distance between them. And then the third mark is for the conclusion that you form based on those answers.